Ingrid Liu. I will request them to introduce themselves before they start their talks or contribution in this webinar. Okay, let's start with Shannon. Shannon, you remember our line in IMRF, the right of migrant workers to self-organization and collective bargaining purposes, regardless of their immigration status. And you being part of this movement, part of the trade union movement international, can you tell us why this is of the strategic importance for the migrant workers to be accorded the right to self-organization and collective bargaining? And of course, there is also this notion that the survival of the international trade union movement also somehow hinges or depend, if you like, as to whether we can recruit as members these migrant workers, given the complexities of the world of work today. So maybe before you start, Shannon, you can also introduce yourselves in the next 10 minutes or so. Please, Shannon, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and greetings, brothers, sisters, and siblings. I'm sending you warm solidarity wherever you are in the world today, and it really is an honor to be a part of this panel and this discussion. I come to you as the Immigration Policy Director for the AFL-CIO, which is the U.S. Federation of 58 unions across representing workers across all sectors of the economy. Our members, you know, they come from every region of the world, and they have every type of immigration status. So it is really our priority to, I'm sorry, just getting a little feedback. Are we good? Okay, just to make sure that everyone who lives and works here has, you know, fair pay, safe working conditions, and fair treatment, and so that is the lens through which we pursue our immigration work, and to do that effectively, we work very closely with our comrades in the global labor movement, the ITC, and the Council of Global Unions. So it's great to have my comrades on this conversation today. And, you know, this topic that we're focused on now is really close to my heart. So often in our global gatherings, I think we focus our attention on what we want and need states and our global institutions to do. It is, of course, critically important to clarify our policy priorities. But if we really want to be successful in advancing a humane, rights-based immigration agenda, then we also have to ask ourselves how we're going to win. And we know that there are incredibly powerful forces benefiting, indeed profiting from the current exploitative and racist systems. So if we do want to make real gains, which I know we all do, we too have to focus on building power, which is why I'm so grateful to be a part of this conversation that is really about organizing. You know, to fix the systems that are failing workers and migrants, the global labor movement has called for a new social contract that ensures equality and inclusion, climate-friendly jobs, rights for all workers, and universal social protections. I think we all feel the power of that vision and you know, want to help make it a reality. And to do that, we need a broad progressive movement for change. And unions really do have a key role to play. So, you know, we just want to unapologetically affirm that want more immigrants and refugees to be union members. Everyone who has a job, in fact, should have a chance to join a union, and particularly those who are at the greatest risk of abuse. With union membership comes representation at work, the added protection of a collective bargaining agreement, increased training opportunities, and a means to promote social cohesion, and minimize the all too risks of right-wing populist backlash against welcoming policies. And I do want to dig in on this a little bit, because I think it's important to understand that a collective bargaining agreement is one of the best tools that we have to make up for the gaps in protections for migrant workers in our broader legal frameworks. It is a great equalizer because union contracts actually disproportionately help those who need it most, those who have been marginalized in our economy. By ensuring equal pay and treatment for all workers, regardless of gender, race, or immigration status, a union contract is a critical tool to help redress systemic discrimination and injustice. So we want more people to have that power of shaping their terms and conditions of work together. And we should acknowledge that we are operating in a time that is scary, but also potentially transformational. Workers around the country, around the world, many of them migrants, are engaging in inspiring levels of collective action. And through that action, they have won hard-fought gains in pay and conditions for work that has been, undervalued for decades, right? And they're doing that, in some times by withholding their labor or threatening to. And strikes led by union and non-union workers alike are really helping to lift the floor and create fair compensation in so many sectors of our global economy. So, getting back to some of the points that Dong opened with, I think, we see workers' agency as fundamental to achieving fair migration and decent work for all. Freedom of association is really an enabling right that shifts the power dynamics so that workers can protect and advance their interests, their own interests as they see them through collective action and negotiations with employers. And that's one of the reasons that we see the rights conventions, in particular the ILO conventions, is so critical because without promoting and realizing international human rights, humanitarian and labor law, we really can never hope to reverse the entrenched patterns of discrimination and exploitation against migrant workers. And removing barriers to organizing is critical in our minds to defending excluded workers of all sorts, because unions provide concrete mechanisms to enforce labor standards and to remedy disputes. And without those mechanisms, as we see all too often, migrants really have no means to seek recourse when their rights are violated, which is why there is such a sense of impunity, right, with employer behavior that we absolutely must end. And to do that, our perspective is we can't wait for our laws to change. We have to work to change them through our actions. Our predecessors built unions before we had laws regulating unions. And of course, we all know that people have migrated throughout time long before we had governance of migration. So it's time for us, to be bold in what we seek and how we act to win that. I'm talking to you today from Boston, where I'm attending the Bricklayers Convention. And for the next 2 days in a series of workshops, we're going to talk about one thing, and that is organizing, and how we prevent immigration status from being a barrier to worker organizing. At the end of the week, I'm going back to DC, where we're hosting at our headquarters a 2-day training focused on this same topic. And we have union organizers participating from all sectors of the country, of the economy, and all regions of the country. So we really do believe that now is the time to focus on organizing and power building. We're committed to doing that, and we want to work with all of you to build effective campaigns that win. So maybe I'll stop there, Don, and see where the conversation takes us.
Thanks a lot, Shannon, and say our best wishes to brothers and sisters in the Brooklyn Congress and your forthcoming 2 days training in DC. I remember or pick up 3 important points, but take a note of this because we will go back in the second round. The social contract. Perhaps you can elaborate on that further. What specific elements that we as an international trade union movement is espousing on social contract, particular for migrant workers to exercise their right to join unions. You also mentioned about the importance of collective bargaining. I wonder whether there are specific clauses or provisions that are attractive to migrant workers to be part of the union. So it's like an incentive for them. And I think it's a good segue that you mentioned that removing barriers for organizing, because we will ask Manfred as our next speaker. Manfred, you're on the very unique migration corridor, right? Just days ago, there were, and again, one of the tragic news of the boat from Libya that capsized, killing dozens of immigrants from Africa mainly. And the Mediterranean is one of the very challenging area. And we would like to hear from you, Manfred, on how your organization is working to organize migrant workers. What strategies are actually working in that particular migration corridor? And if we can use Shannon's word, how do you remove these barriers in organizing a campaign? Manfred, maybe you can also introduce yourself before you continue your contribution. The floor is yours, Manfred, please.
Thank you, my friends. Here we are talking about something that is happening now, but that started 20 years ago, more or less. So that is the new rules that have been imposed in the Mediterranean area by the EU growth. I started during the years 90s, taking Roma children to school after studying history, Ukrainian, Russian language, something that I thought was forgotten. Now they are becoming trendy once more. And I specialized on minorities from Eastern Europe who were migrating to Italy. Then I discovered they were refugees not recognized because they were Roma people. So this is a minority very much discriminated in Europe. They were working in very informal sectors, sometimes even in criminal activities, very small criminal businesses, of course. And then I started to work on problems of all refugees in Italy during the 90s. During the Kosovo crisis, we opened the shelters for Roma people who were supposed before to sleep outside because they were Roma. So providing the access, I approached the migration and asylum issues as a problem of exclusion, social exclusion, cultural exclusion, political exclusion. exclusion from associations, to be excluded to be represented in a trade union even. Then something happened during the year 2001 when we had the World Social Forum in Brazil. The first one was dedicated to more than 350 issues with different workshops and meetings, and there were only 2 workshops about migration. One was the World March of Women. They were very much interested on migration issues at that time. We are talking about 20 years ago. And the other one was the one sponsored by us, an European group of small activists, about the UN Convention for Migrant Workers' Rights. That was not signed by Europe. So we started an European movement inside the social forum, the World Social Forum that started in Brazil and then spreaded for first in the Latin countries, so Spain, France, Italy, and then in the rest of Europe. Now it is very much open to migration issues. When you go to a manifestation in Rome or in Paris or in Berlin, everyone expects to find a big group of migrants or refugees in any political manifestation of our countries. 20 years ago, it was not like this. It was not so easy. During the same years, 2001, let's remember 11 September, let's remember the World Conference of Durban against racism, in which Israel, USA, and Italy and Canada withdrew from the World Conference. And after the 11th September, we fold down 20 years before in the intercultural dialogue. Until that moment, for example, in my country, that's Italy, in my town, that was Rome, every year we had some manifestation about peace, and in the same place were manifesting the Palestinians and the Italian Jewish minorities, very much linked with the communist groups coming from resistance during the Second World War. So there was much solidarity until 11 September 2001. Then the history changed. Those groups are not able to have a manifestation anymore together in the same town. This brought also to a changement of all the networks of self-organization, of the trade unions on one side, of the churches to the other side. Governments were very much conservative about migrants and refugees, considering them potential terrorists. And many security laws invaded our countries. In that way, we became aware that the problem was not only that our government don't want to sign the UN Convention for the Rights of Migrant Workers, but they wanted also to reform the Commission for Human Rights at United Nations in a very restrictive manner. So that until that moment, when we lobbied at UN, we had the same cross points, the same decisional points with indigenous people, with other categories that were linked to migration. After the so-called reform of the Commission for Human Rights at United Nations, it became the Council for Human Rights at United Nations, and we lost many partners during the trespass. So the movement weakened very much from 2001 to 2005, let's say this, that's the moment in which the Global Compact starts to identify as an entity. The Global Forum on Migration and Development, held in Brussels, was the first moment in which we met new activists coming from different cultures. This was not anymore a problem of Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders. There were many migrant associations that came to the Global Forum for Migration and Development. But this is something that was not complete. There was the need from the association of the rest of the world to identify a new language that could bring us to have a real dialogue with the Global Forum on Migration and Development. We had before only one language, the human rights language, that we learned at the Commission and at the Council for Human Rights at United Nations. Since that moment, there was a change of language. I would say it's more European, less global. And the mentality to invest on bilaterality instead of multilaterality brought us to intend the dialogue about migration as a contract, as an agreement. So in a very profit way. On one side, the migrants movement refused completely the Global Compact. On the other side, some diasporas were able to reach this contact point. Which ones? Well, the diasporas of countries like Philippines, or like Senegal, or like Morocco, this is countries that have a good diaspora, very well organized everywhere, with trade unions already. There are many people from these nationalities that have already double nationality in hosting countries, so they can count a bit more. Actually, the work of a campaigner is going from social exclusion to global institutions. So we have to write guides for migrants where global institutions say us, please don't write anything on undocumented migrants because we are not helping them. And when we write the guide for migrants, we also have to include the instructions for the undocumented, but they are not considered. This is not the values that the institutions ask to us. But movements and orientation services, shelter services, and even trade unions, associations are very much linked. So for the actual situation, what we have actually in Europe is agencies that provide services to migrants, and it is agencies that defend the rights of migrants. This is not always the same. And even in the mandate of such associations, there could be something that is needed, like a presence of migrants at all levels of those organizations. So you will see many researchers in my country, that's Italy, researchers on migration who just speak Italian, for example. No? So there is an isolation from academic world to the movement world that is very, very clear. Actually, we are celebrating a victory in Italy, for example. It is the election of a certain Abubakar Sumahoro. This is a Mali migrant who became Italian and became deputy to the national parliament just yesterday.
Yeah.
After 10 years of being exploited as an employer in food industry,
Yeah.
as many asylum seekers are forced to do in my country, he became slowly Italian, and he was elected yesterday with the Green coalition, with the leftist Green coalition.
Okay.
In
Manfred,
my
can
country.
we stop it for a while in this round? I have
Yes, just let me
taken, yeah.
finish saying that actually the campaigns are empowering people like Abu Bakr, and there is the campaign Abolish Frontex about the borders, as you see, that is very much important. And then there are other campaigns about reforming cooperation of Europe.
Okay. Similar to what we heard from Shannon on the first round, we would like, I also saw it in the chat, of course, while we are celebrating the election of a colleague from Senegal, integrated in the social and politics of the country. It's also the serious observation from outsider, at least on my part, the election of a far right government in Italy, which observers are saying may influence the new shift on your government's policy regime. Something to consider in the next round. And you mentioned a good reference to from social inclusion to global institutions. So pretty much similar to what we are all part of this global discourse and movement that we are in. So please consider that in the next round of the exchanges. Now we will move to Ingrid, and of course she will introduce herself. But Ingrid, you will highlight a very specific case of Sabri, an Indonesian migrant workers. I will not preempt the details of the case, but of course, in your first 10 minutes or so, while describing what is the case all about, I think equally important is how will this case be of strategic value to all migrant workers in Malaysia in terms of the overall impact it will have on all actors and institutions of migration policy regime of Malaysia. So Ingrid, please describe to us what is the case all about and the ramification of this in the overall policy framework, not just for Indonesian migrant workers, but to all migrant workers in Malaysia. Ingrid, you have the floor.
Hi, thanks, Brother Dong, and good day, everyone. I'm Ingrid Liao. I'm the secretary of the Sabah Timber Industries Employees Union, and also the chairperson of the BWI Malaysia License Council. The topic about the organizing is organized. So this is it's really an important issue and important things, especially for a union to organize workers. In the case that we are facing, even though in Malaysia we have a good law, the workers also have a right to form. This is in the Malaysia federal law, that workers have the right to form and join the union on their own choices, and they cannot be fired for engaging in unionizing activities. These rights apply to all workers, regardless if they are local or migrant workers. So all have the same rights. However, it is not always the case. The reality is that the majority of the companies are against union. So this is the reality on the ground. So the fears of economic losses as workers fight for higher wages, I would say decent actually, but and also better benefits, and I would say this is a baseless fear, so it should be changed. The mentality should be changed. So this fear has resulted in most employers taking precautions against the existence of the union in their companies. So especially a national union like us, you know, we are national unions. So in our years of experience in organizing workers, when the employers smell the workers being approached by the union, especially for the migrant workers, so there will be, of course, approach. I mean, by the management group. So they start getting a resistance and a threats from the management group. So the threat like termination, loss of jobs, like discrimination and etc. So see the power of money. I would just say the power of the money has gone beyond the values of the humanity, and finally the workers have to be a victim of the modern slavery system in the culture of work. That's what I see. And of course, the victims are mostly migrant workers. So, like the case now that which Brother Dong mentioned, we are facing a case that is Sabri, one of our member, is a documented migrant workers, Indonesian migrant workers actually. So he was wrongfully terminated, where within hours of attempted termination by the company on the 4th, recently, that is 4th April this year. This Sabri, he's documented migrant workers with a valid social visit temporary employment. So he was arrested by police as a suspect on non-immigration crime. So on the 5th of April. So he was brought before the magistrate, not brought before the magistrate, you know, during the 24 hours. So he is finally the police was it during the police was given Sabri his passport, Indonesian passport, on arrest. So on the 19th of April, he was brought to Tawau Session Court. That is, he's in Sabah, which is in the east of Malaysia, and charged for being an undocumented migrant. So then, and he was unrepresented during the time. Then wrongly convicted for crime he did not commit it. So he was sentenced to 11 months in prison and 5 strokes of whip. So on the 23rd June, he was wrongly and illegally whipped at the Tawau prison, despite the fact that there was an appeal that had yet to be heard by the High Court. So finally, the High Court in Tawau collapsed the case for revision on July 22nd, and the judge acquitted Sabri. But the judge acquitted Sabri is because of the union is there, meaning the union has raised this case to the consulate of Indonesia, that Sabri is actually innocent. He is a documented worker. So in this situation where we see how pity or to see a workers who is not represented by anyone, particularly a migrant workers who is working abroad and not organized or not unionized. So they are prone to face this kind of violation or harassment by the employer. So this is this kind of human rights violation cases and issue is really serious that we need to raise and address to all parties, because it is not only Sabri alone, but it is representing the whole migrant workers in Malaysia. So we have to raise this. We have to put up or help him out to claim justice and his rights for all that what he has gone through. So this is a good example, and we are fighting now and still in progress. So we just hope that we will be able to get or to claim the rights for Sabri and also for rights for all the migrant workers here in Malaysia. Yeah, thank you, Brother Ram.
Yeah, thank you, Ingrid. And of course, we also would like to appreciate the support extended by our colleagues from the People's Migration Challenge and also from the Action Committee for signing on to the joint statements issued, and also to the petition submitted by BWI and SDIEU to SUWAKAM, that's the Malaysian Human Rights Commission, to conduct a public inquiry. But just to add on how complex Sabri's case is, you know, in Malaysia at least, the moment that you are, the employer terminated your employment contract, at that instance, the person will be a persona non grata, meaning the person has to leave the country because the legal stay approval is dependent on the employment contract. But while he has an industrial case and these criminal cases that to be filed, he has to apply a special pass, and it will be very subjective from the immigration department, either give you a day or a week or a month. And even you will have the special pass, you're not allowed to work at all. So you imagine that this migrant worker has a case, he or she is allowed to stay in the country, but he or she cannot work. So, and he has or she has a family, just in the case of Sabri. So, but we will have another round on that for Ingrid, particularly the last question on what are the ramifications to the institutions or actors involved on Sabri's case in overall reform, if you like, that this may introduce. Alicia, I may have missed some question in the chat box. If there are, can you please call my attention? Otherwise, we're all right. Yeah. But before we go to second round, any colleagues who would like to give comments or impressions on the first round of discussion from our speakers? Anyone? You can either raise your hand or write in the chat box. Okay, maybe while you're pondering on that, let's go back to Shannon. Shannon, we said earlier, okay, Seku Bagura, and then we can call Aname, yeah? Seku, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and also I'm very grateful to be part of this this campaign. And if I could say further, and myself here, I am one of the victims of irregular migrations. I could remember sometimes in 2017, I took up the journey through the Sahara Desert and found myself in Libya, down to the sea. We spent some times, and it's a very sad experience, but I normally used to share that experience. And we were in the camp waiting for crossing, and when the Libyan police came across, and all of us were arrested and put into prisons. In the prisons, I suffered in the prison for 6 months. There comes IUM came in and tried to identify. And before IUM take or buy a ticket, you must bring your embassy to identify you. So I was in the prisons, more than 3,000 in the prison. So I was chosen as a chairman within the prison to advocate for a good condition for my colleagues inmates within the prison. So there comes the Red Cross, the IOM, and other humanitarian organizations came into our aid. So finally, I had to return back to my country. And getting back to my country, I said, okay, I went to the IOM office and tried to see the head of mission. Then from the head of mission, I said, what I have seen and what I have witnessed, I don't want my colleague Sierra Leone to embark on the same journey. So therefore, I decided to form these organizations named Advocacy Network Against Irregular Migration. Today, this organization has become the safe space for all migrants in Sierra Leone. So we are going out helter and skelter to see that we raise awareness and by sharing our experience so that all our young Syrians will not embark on this same journey. So before I landed, I was once a member of the burial team within Libya when they pushed some of our brothers, they drowned into the sea, and maybe after 2-3 days, they settled in the sea. So we took them from the coast and buried them into the desert. So all what I have seen, so I say, oh, thanks to God, because I was not part of that. I was not part of that,
Yeah.
so I am simply in
Okay.
Sierra Leone. So I normally
Yeah.
share that experience to everybody, and my organization is well registered and recognized as a migrant organizations in Sierra Leone. So last
Okay.
year I took part to this
Sekou, yeah, thank
GCM.
you for
Um,
sharing your personal
Thank you very much.
experience.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's um, a very inspiring one, I would say, from being on a very difficult situation. You surmounted, you managed to, I mean, literally survive and even organize organization for migrant workers. That's well noted. Anime, you have the floor, and please be also precise. Anime?
Yeah. Basically, I had a question. Thank you for all the panelists. But we're thinking, yani we're trying to work, just to give you a bit of context, sorry, I'm working as advocacy community coordinator in Lebanon for an organization called Anti-Racism Movement. So we're trying to advocate for migrant domestic workers' rights in Lebanon under the kafala system and the sponsorship system. My question was, we're talking about how we can try to have a collective with migrant workers, how we can have collective actions, trying to build power for effective campaigns. But in the context of Lebanon, of course, we have different migrant domestic workers with different nationalities. And sometimes one of the challenge that we're having can be to actually, from the beginning, to organize people. How we can organize people when we have different nationalities, when you have also the challenge of, for example, based on their workplace and work condition where employers are giving more privilege, let's say, to people coming from Philippines and less to people coming from different African countries. When you have the race issues also in the middle of all of it. So sometimes proposing and having action and making the space to discuss campaigns and discussing action can be also one of the challenge when you have so many differences among migrant workers. So I just wanted to basically know if the panelist maybe has an idea. I know that Shannon talked about this, about the action. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you have any ideas for community buildings.
Okay, thanks, Aname. I think it's a question directed to all our three speakers. How do we do the collective action for effective campaign, considering there are also complexities amongst migrant workers? Races is one, as we have heard from Aname. We'll call Brother Laxman first, then we go back to the speakers to respond to these questions, even from the sharing of the other colleague earlier. Brother Lakshman, please.
Thank you, Brother Gong. My question is to the panelists. The state is organized in their own rights to protect the interest of the state, and so as so many other groups are organized, like religious groups and political parties are organized. But most needed organized sector is the workers' sector, because they are the weakest in the society, social atmosphere. And what I see is now there's a big attack on the organizing on many ways, like racism and all other, like our sisters have said, that the nationality and they are fragmented. So we have to look into one of the major aspect, how to bring them into one interest, the workers' interest. So we have to find a way we can easily organize our migrant workers in any country, in the destination country, where we can convince them without fear to organize for their collective bargaining, for their implementation of the bilateral agreements. These should be the action now. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, Brother Lakshman. I mean, of course, a state will have to promulgate laws that will protect its interests as an entity. But at the same time, how do we figure out that we also an outward policy regime for migrant workers or a community, not necessarily coming from within that particular state? Actually, Manfred, when you were discussing, it came to my mind, what's the model of the migrant workers being recruited in the trade union, and then Aname just pointed that out. In at least in Asian countries of destination, there are varied models, but you can add on this particularly. In South Korea, for example, they have their own migrant workers union just among themselves. And then, of course, some are also migrant workers being integral part of being a member amongst or together with the Koreans. In Hong Kong, if I'm not mistaken, the way how our colleagues from the International Domestic Workers Federation also started, there is a domestic migrant workers for Philippines, Indonesians, and later on been a formed part. And I understand somehow this is also being replicated in Malaysia, for example. We have Lisel here in the call, maybe she can also contribute. But what is you think? Of course, we cannot prescribe that a particular model, but how is it in your case, Shannon and Manfred afterwards, referring to Aname's question? Yeah, Shannon.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think that it's clear that we see sort of relentless attempts to divide working people on all different lines, and I think whenever we let those work, whenever they're effective, right, it completely, erodes our power and our future. So it hurts my heart to hear Brother Lakshman say that, the worker sector is the weakest. And I think we're all here today because we want to change that. I don't think that there is an easy and straightforward solution. I can give you all a couple of things that we're trying here, just as ideas. I mean, one thing that I will say, obviously, is that that identifying, worker leaders and elevating their voice is critically important. So often, the clarity of understanding the systems that are oppressing us and how to overcome them, can be most effectively articulated by the folks who are experiencing it. And so building those committees across, sort of racial and ethnic and national origin lines can be really transformational to finding the glue to really understand how we have this kind of shared fate in a global economy, and that it's only by coming together that we're going to counter all of the forces that are aligned, to steal from us and exploit us. But I think one concrete step that we're taking here in the policy framework is to demand status protections, concrete status protections, and work authorization for immigrants who are taking action to help enforce our labor laws, whether that's by forming or joining a union. Dong, I see the wage theft sign behind you, whether it's by filing claims about wage theft or health and safety violations, those sorts of things. So, for decades, what we've seen is that immigration enforcement has been like weaponized as a tool to keep workers quiet when they start to raise issues at their workplace or when they start organizing. And so, what we're trying to do, and we're seeing some real progress, is to reverse that. And so the model that we're seeking is, instead of workers being at risk when they speak up, we want them to be protected when they speak up. In fact, we want them to be protected because they speak up, right? Because we know that that's what's needed to ensure that workplaces will be safe and fair for all workers, wherever they're from. And because we know that this could be transformational to our campaigns, to have workers be eligible for protections because they're organizing, when they're organizing. So that is obviously a model that we're excited about. I'm not sure how much chance there may be to replicate it. But I think that we have to just be looking for creative mechanisms. And I wanted to go back. I know Dong asked if maybe we could share a little bit more about how we use our collective bargaining agreements.
Yeah.
I have, this is the toolkit. I don't know if you can see it here, that we're introducing this week in our programs. And it has a whole section on provisions that we could try to win when we're negotiating with employers, some of which are things that we haven't been able to win in negotiating with states, right? But that could really make a difference. So, I mean, all of our agreements specify, pay and conditions, grievance procedures, and those would apply evenly, right, to all members of the workplace, regardless of status. But other things that are much more specific to migrant workers are, sort of like constraints on what employers can do in terms of engagement with immigration enforcement agencies and protection of rights of workplace members during those, mandates for translation and interpretation. So there can be discipline taken against someone in a language that they don't understand. They must have their contract in the language they understand. Obviously, very clear, non-discrimination parameters, leaves of absence for workers to deal with immigration-related issues, legal support for them when they do that, and sometimes even funds for, let's say, processing and naturalization to become a citizen. Sometimes we have employers who pay those fees. We've seen union contracts negotiating prayer rights, in parts of the country where some of those issues are new, right? As new cultures come in through our refugee resettlement programs and things like that. And I would just say that I think the importance of a union contract has become more clear, coming out of the pandemic, because I think there was all this evidence, right, that those provisions promote not just the safety of workers, but also of consumers and community members, right? And as we've seen, corporations push for immunity from their obligations to protect, their workforce and their customers. I think that the corrective power of collective bargaining to check corporate greed is something that more and more people see and support. And so we're seeing approval of unions really escalating coming out of the pandemic. And, there's good reason for that, right? In this severe global recession, the CEO pay rates, they're getting more obscene. We have these widening inequalities, and we know that that's, destabilizing to countries. And so I think preventing workers from negotiating a fair share of the wealth that they help to produce is its own kind of form of austerity. And I think it's really important to see it in the context of, our global recovery as a barrier to adjust an inclusive recovery coming out of the pandemic. So I don't know, those are just a few thoughts, Dong, on some of those key questions. But I guess I would just say maybe one more thing, which is that, I think that a progressive immigration framework really requires labor rights that are available to all workers, precisely for the task of building solidarity and worker power. And we really do see our rights, right, to a ballot, like democratic rights, and to a union, and to a just path to migrate as being linked. And I think, sort of like aligning our struggles across these areas is critical to having a more hopeful future for workers.
Thanks, Shannon. I wonder whether there's a PDF copy of that booklet that maybe you can share in the chat box if that is possible, so it can be shared. The one that you show, if there is. And yeah, Manfred, it's a similar. Can you, if you like, to respond to a question of anime? I mean, what has evolved in your case? Is there a separate union for migrants, or they are actually fully integrated in the Italian unions as a member? Yeah. And how is this actually being played out?
Migrants are fully excluded from Italian trade unions, as in the rest of the world. I spoke with Moni Rutzaman, who was an activist in South Korea, who told me, we have been the first trade union in the world to have an undocumented migrant as a representative of a trade union.
Yeah.
So this was the first world's experience, and this did not happen in Europe before, did not happen in Europe until now. So this is the first point. How can trade unions absorb migrants to the representative level? And this we have to ask ourselves as NGOs, as associations, are we doing this or not? Because it is clear that this friend who became deputy yesterday, after 10 years of integration in Italy, has been before a slave excluded from any trade unionist representativity. This is what the news is he bringing to us. From this point of view, the global campaigns are important because they remind us that workers are all the same, and then we see this as a special need that is very urgent to represent migrants' voices in trade unions. So we make consultations, we give them orientation, so we write guides for them after we learned with the orientation what to write. And we ask to the European Commission to pay those guides and to publish them on their internet sites. So the European Commission, together with the sending countries that are Pakistan or India or even China, they sponsor orientation guides that have been written by trade unionists like Shannon or NGOs experts like me, and they buy those things, they delete all the recommendations for the undocumented, and then they publish the recommendations for the regular migrants, regular refugees. And what is needed here to absorb undocumented workers, not only in the society, but also in the representation of the society. You know, they are excluded, and even from the basic information that we give them, we should consider, we take this information from them. This is one of the things that comes to my mind, but it's very important to pass from Libya for coming back, because Libya is actually what our friend said, an hell for migrants. So that's why the last people who drowned in the Mediterranean Sea, they came from Lebanon, because Libya became too dangerous but forgotten. In Europe, we never talk about Libya, but it is closer to my home than Ukraine. So all refugees from Ukraine we accept because they are white Christians and they are allied to the NATO. And we don't accept Africans from Libya because they have to trespass Niger, and it is forbidden to trespass Niger. They have to stay down in the sub-Saharan Africa. They don't have to come to Europe, even if they are refugees. This is how the European borders management works, with the participation of transit countries like Turkey, that takes money for stopping refugees, not only migrants, but also refugees and vulnerable people, to our borders. And we have the proofs that international mafias are lucrating in police and army that are involved in protecting our borders. So in short terms, our borders are held by criminals. This happens with the transnational mafia of Italy, Malta, and Libya, and there are many articles and historical discoveries that have been forgotten about this. But also, if you watch the mafias between Turkey and Greece, between Morocco and Spain, there are people who are there lucrating with our politicians, not against. This must be very clear. Then what can we do to people from Libya in a town like Rome? A group of doctors and psychologists against torture, because all of them are coming and they are all victims of mistreatment and torture. All women have been raped, and we are talking about thousands and thousands of people yearly. So why we asked to our government, why, when we cooperate with Libya, we give them the ships to drown the refugees, and we don't start from the well-being in the prisons of migrants in Libya. We have even some phones, some cell phones in the prisons of Libya that are calling our activists and are saying, you know, they have killed this person, they are doing us this and that. But, you know, this movement must be aware that we are talking about these people.
Manfred, that's a very illustrative reply to Anime. But if you notice, there are exchanges on the chat box on what Lisel also responded to, that domestic workers in Hong Kong are considered a union, and there's a follow-up question on that. Might as well ask, you know, Lisel, you want to come in here and make a brief intervention on how you actually been part of that initiative in Hong Kong, and how is it being replicated now in Malaysia? Because there is a question in the chat box. Might as well respond to that so everybody can hear it. Lisel.
Okay, Dong, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Good morning in other countries. So, our sister union in Hong Kong were there already since 2012. So 2012 until now, but of course they have to adjust the current situation because of the new law, and it was replicated here. Although in Malaysia we are not recognized as, or domestic workers are not recognized as workers, so we cannot form a union. Sister Irene also here, so she can define why domestic workers cannot join or form a union. So that's why we have to form it as an association. But even though you know, a lot of challenges we are facing as an organization, but still we managed to form our union, or we can say association, and finally, even at least for a minute, that we have a chance to voice our voices, domestic workers' voices, in the parliament yesterday. That's the latest that we can, I mean, like domestic workers achieve. Filipinos and Indonesians were able to raise.
Yeah, I think Stefan,
Of course, through the help of our senior unionists and other NGOs. Thank you.
Lisel, I think of course you answered it correctly, but there is a related question, considering that the Hong Kong Confederation of Labor has to disband, given the pressure. What happened to these affiliate members, including the domestic workers? Are they still operating despite a very restrictive political environment, so to speak?
Yeah, they're still operating, but of course they have to minimize the picket.
Okay, so they're still around.
How you call it, so that's the only thing that, and of course they have to adjust and change the leaflets while mobilizing migrant workers. So but they still exist.
Okay. Thank you for that contribution. Now, Ingrid, let's go back to on this particular. Again, what will be the ramification or the impact of this case in the overall sorry, this pass is being heard. What are some of impact you foresee?
Sorry, Dong, you're breaking actually. I can't hear you clearly.
Sorry, I said, can you cite, can you describe
Hi,
can you hear me well? Did
Dong,
you hear me that?
breaking.
Okay, it's maybe my connection. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Okay.
Okay. What I asked is, can you name or cite likely impact of Sabri's case to the overall migration policy regime of Malaysia?
Yeah. Since we have make it public, the case of Sabri in all over, this is very good. And in fact, since the Human Rights Commission is also started to look into this case, so we are just hoping that they will hold the public inquiry so that the system or can be set right. Of course, we are hoping that Sabri's work permit can be reinstated, you know, and also the company, because of the wrongly terminated, and he can be reinstated to his workplace. And of course, we really seriously need to raise and address this case by all parties, actually, from government to government. I mean, from the Indonesian government and also the Malaysian, it has to look into this case holistically, because it gives really it's a good case to be an example or some issue that they can use to look back what where is the failure of the system. Particularly also it's involved the companies, the employer. I mean, is in the employer, because see how the employer, in the case of Sabri, how influence, I mean, the employers have influenced even the government official and also the legal system to intimidate the workers as a lesson to others. So this is we are just hoping that this thing can be set right quickly.
That's right. I mean, if you look into the case brief, all indications are telling that the company has connived with the arresting officers, the immigration officials, and there was also a boo-boo on the part of the Indonesian consulate appointed the law firm, right? The immigration department changing his employment contract and so on, and even the judge. So this will really shake the entire institutions of Malaysian migration policy regime. I can see Irene. Irene, you're supporting this particular case, right? Can you like on how union in Malaysia, being a co-chair of the labor law reform committee? Irene, if you like.
Yeah, I just want to say that in the case of Sabri, as well as in some other cases of the migrants, in Sabri's case, I think we have a good example of how the union stepped in at the right time to stop the continued detention of Sabri. I think that is a very strong, what shall I say? The union really did this to assert the rights of migrant workers who don't really have much access to rights. And that, I think, is a very important point. It makes about the necessity for migrant workers to be union members. That's the first one. The second thing I want to say is that in Malaysia, when other institutions fail migrant workers, including many trade unions as well, the Malaysian courts have recently begun to speak up about the rights of migrant workers. So there are domestic workers whose cases were rejected by the government department, by the Human Resource Ministry. But the court said that even if they're undocumented, they have a right to protection from the government department. That is what the Labor Department is there for. So I think these kinds of actions have contributed quite significantly to workers who are very difficult to organize in Malaysia, like, for example, the domestic workers. I think we need more legal activism as such, in terms of our struggles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is a time actually for us to be creative. In Malaysia, the debate is still on between the views expressed by the Labour Reform Coalition with the views expressed by the Malaysian Trade Union Congress. They have differing views about migrant rights to organize. So that debate is still going on, but it is significant because it is out there in the open.
Yeah.
Both sides have to, yeah.
And we know that we are on the correct side of it, of the debate.
Yes.
And thank you for
Yes.
that, Irene. I'd just like to acknowledge the comments in the chat box from Vijaya. It's I won't read all that, but there is a query on the possibility on how they can be helped to organize women, particularly domestic workers in the Gulf countries. Okay. There's a question from Francis Ingrid on what is the take on the recent trade union bill scheduled for government. Okay, that is linked to criminal and terrorism. So that's a particular question. Okay, there's one from Madaban. It's more of a comment, I would say. We have, like, let's say, if you don't mind, colleagues, particularly the speakers, maybe to extend a little bit, extra 5 minutes or so, just to have a last round on the parting words campaign that we can do together. And then there's a particular question on the chat box, Ingrid, on the trade union law. Maybe even Irene can help that out. Okay, so let's start from reverse. We start from you, Ingrid, now. Some concluding remarks and takeaway messages that we can do together as part of this People's Migration Challenge, particularly this series 1 on the right to self-organization and collective bargaining regardless of migration status. Ingrid, please.
Yeah, in the situation, especially on the migrant workers and the workers, overall workers, of course, we are. It's really crucial, I would say. We have to organize the workers because of workers' rights are human rights, valued to respect. So that's from me. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm looking at the response of Madhavan. Actually, Madhavan is responding to the query of Vijaya. That's good interaction in the chat group. Okay. Manfred, your takeaway message on how we can further this separate but interrelated campaign somehow?
Yes, the regions are very different. We see that in the USA, it is possible to absorb undocumented migrants in trade unions. In Europe, it is impossible. but on different sides, we have to measure different freedoms, and every continent here has nothing to defend. Migrants are discriminated everywhere. And we see this as a problem of exclusion. For example, the right to organize of just coming migrants, because this is not the problem of organizing migrants who became citizens. The problem is the last ones who came, the most vulnerable ones, no? And when we were in the no border camp in Rotterdam in August, we met many representatives of association of migrants, even associations not registered in Europe because they had no documents to do such procedures. And the representative of the Nigerian migrants of Amsterdam told us that in such a civil country where we manifested all together against the banks that were building the borders in the Belarus, Poland for privileging Ukrainian refugees instead of non-European refugees, this democratic place that is the Netherlands have policemen who are beating Nigerian migrants and refugees on the road of Amsterdam every night. And they don't know where to sleep, they don't know where to eat. And even the president of the association who receives such telephone callings at 2, 3 of the night, you know, I don't know where to go to sleep. And he has been beaten many times by the police of the town, and he told this, and this is the example of how in the center of the empire we have more rights than in the peripheries of the empire. This is the main cause of migration.
Yeah, that's a reality that has to be dealt with. Different regional contexts, but of course we do as much as we can. And Shannon, on the parting words on how we can still sustain this cooperation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I just want to say that, you know, I got drawn into the migration work, like most of us do, through a horrible case that was happening. What I want to emphasize about that case is that, you know, teachers, public school teachers are being exploited in the state of Louisiana in the United States. And the only reason that I knew what was happening was because I had contacts with the Philippine labor movement. And the migrants were so afraid in their local context in the US that they didn't know who to talk to. So they were talking to their, you know, their families and the unions back home. And it's only because we had that relationship through our global labor movement that we were able to start to engage in a case to defend them. So I do think it's critically important for us as we're talking in this global space to understand the need to have open lines of communication and collaboration between unions and organizations in countries of origin and destination, and to look towards how that cross-border collaboration can strengthen our advocacy and ensure that we can improve like our representation in our defense, and hopefully build some real organizing strategies that are like relevant to the kind of mobility that we see in our global labor market. And so I think we need to do more experimentation in trying to build those models, and that will be stronger when we're doing it together. And so look forward to that collaboration.
Okay, thanks a lot. And we're just on time to conclude this first series. There will be more, and it will happen every last Tuesday of the month. you'll be informed. But I would like to use what again the phrase that you referred to, Shannon. I mean, as days goes by, I mean, the cooperation between trade union organization and the NGO is getting more. To be honest, on the first few years, there are some reservation and some even the different point of view. But as we have proven here, committee that we. I know there's still many things that you would like to contribute, but this is the end. Those who have been, and of course to our interpreters, and a meeting of the members of the PMC 30 minutes after this webinar. Again, on behalf of the colleagues from the People's Migration Challenge and from the BWI and the unions within it, thank you very much for your time and participation. Be safe, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.
Goodbye, my friends.